Hey everyone. So I'm here to talk about Meteor-Now, which is a CLI tool that you can use to deploy Meteor apps onto Now with zero configuration. First, a little bit about me. So I'm a full stack developer. I used to do video game development, and then I switched to working at a fashion startup in New York City. We're in e-commerce. I'm also the host of Meteor Office Hours in New York and the co-author and maintainer of Meteor-Now. So as you may have guessed, I really like the Meteor.js framework. Nothing against Next.js, but I just really like Meteor. I think it's just a really great tool for rapidly developing prototypes and MVPs. You just get, subscriptions, authentication, and all sorts of real-time usage right out of the box. And when Meteor, first came out, they really positioned themselves for this, for just really quick iterations, really quick development in general. So they came with a feature called Meteor Deploy, where you could just type Meteor Deploy and get your Meteor application put up on a server that you don't need to worry about. It wasn't for production usage, but just for development or staging, it was really great. But then when Meteor's development group came out with their paid hosting platform, they decided to kill that feature. So a lot of people were left kind of scrambling and figuring out how to host their own things if they didn't want to if they didn't want to pay a huge amount for really production level deploys. So at one of the Meteor Office Hour events, I came in pretty proud of myself. I had made a system, like a script that I could use to log into a $10 DigitalOcean droplet. It would build my Meteor app and Dockerize it, and then SCP that image to my production server, and then SSH into that production server, reload the Docker image, and with not too much downtime, switch to my updated version. But at my Meteor Office Hour event, one of my friends, Mirza, told me about Now and that they support Docker deploys. So we decided to try and work on a wrapper tool that would make a simple one-line script that we could use to just deploy onto Now. And that looks a lot simpler than doing all those other steps. And you get zero downtime because of the additional URLs, and you just point your alias to the latest deploy. So we had kind of three requirements in terms of what we wanted. We wanted the script to work fast, and we wanted it to be free, support the free tier, at least potentially, and for it to be simple. There exists a couple other, like some Docker files with configs that you can set, or like Meteor Up was a great tool, but you had to manage this JSON file with all sorts of configs. And we wanted just a simple, replacement for Meteor Deploy, where it's just a single line into, and you get your URL back with your application deployed. So if we were to go with a 100% Docker solution where we just distribute like a Docker file, that Docker file would need to install Meteor and then build the app in the in the Docker container, and then run the app from there. But instead, we just trust that Meteor build is going to work on the machine that's developing. This is really meant as a development tool, not really something that you would put on a CI server. So we wanted to go with the following method of just building it locally and then having a Docker file run that locally built node application. So we ran into an issue with this, though, because when you run Meteor build to build a node application from your Meteor app, it's not a typical one package.json with like an npm start that just runs everything. There's like nested node module folders in there. And with the help of Jamo in the Zeit community Slack channel, we were able to debug and figure out that that was the problem, that these nested node module folders were ignored when being uploaded to Now. So instead, we decided to just keep the build directory all zipped into one one tar gzipped file, and then our Docker file would unzip that and then build it from there. But now the problem is we had one giant tar gzipped file that we were going to upload, which was guaranteed to be over 1 megabyte for every deploy. And we really wanted people to be able to use this as under the free tier. So we came up with one weird trick that gets all files under 1 megabyte. We split the tar gzip into 999 kilobytes. And then that worked. We just upload each of them and then concatenated them on the server, and then did everything from there. And then finally, the third requirement that we wanted was for this to be a simple deployment process. We don't want to require extra files in your directory, like a JSON to configure everything. We were okay with that being optional, but we just wanted Meteor-Now to work. So we didn't want it to be tough to pass in Meteor settings, which if there's any people who have experience with Meteor, that's just a common way of storing kind of environment variables that you just store them in a Meteor settings environment variable. And so we also needed to consider, so Meteor runs on, it has a MongoDB by default instance when you run it locally that it points to. And when you deploy, you typically would want to specify what Mongo URL you're going to use as your backend. So we were trying to consider what we could do in order to give people a free MongoDB instance. So we contacted MLab because they support a sandbox account that anyone can just sign up on. And we tried to see if there was an API that we could use. They were really helpful, but they did not offer any sort of API to create free sandbox accounts, and told us to just check back in a few months. So what we ended up on deciding was to bundle a MongoDB instance inside of the same Docker image if you don't specify a separate Mongo URL, and provide just a very clear warning about what all your caveats or limitations are with that, which is, since you're bundling it inside of their Docker container, you're not going to get any persistent data, and if you ever scale up your Now application, you're going to have just completely sharded, separate databases. So it might be useful for certain cases where you don't need persistent data, but still want a database as a backend, which do exist. But in most cases, if you're going to do something for production, you're going to want to specify a Mongo URL, and there's really no getting around that. So that's pretty much all that I had to show, but I could just show you what it looks like to deploy the application. So right here, I have a really simple, it's basically like the hello world, the start of the Meteor default application that they give you. And if we go here, it's got session variable, you've pressed the button 0 times, and then we also store, I've just edited a little bit to store something in a MongoDB database of how many times the button has been pressed at all by anyone, and then also have the Meteor settings be used where it stores some kind of secret key. And let me actually make that bigger. And so you can see that works. And so to deploy it, you just are in your base directory. And Well, I guess if you don't have it, you would need to npm i-g now and Meteor-Now. But probably everyone here, I would hope, has now, at least by now. And I already have Meteor-Now. So you run Meteor-Now, and you get these really pretty spinners as the application builds. And just because this takes a couple minutes, I already did one right before. And what you get is, as they go through, you get a warning that we didn't pass the Mongo URL, and we can read about the limitations here. This link will take you to sorry, I'm using terminal instead of iTerm because of the color scheme. It's a little easier to see here, but this link takes you to a page in our GitHub repo that explains all the issues with bundling a MongoDB instance inside of the Docker container. And, oh, here we go, yeah. And so we can see that this gets put on now. And there we go. So we can open this up in multiple places and see, you can see the collection getting clicked by a lot of people. Yeah, and then here's the settings that we have. We automatically load Meteor settings from a development.settings.json or production.settings.json based on the node environment. And yeah, so if there are any questions about Meteor-Now or why I still use Meteor, I'd like to open it up. Yes?
When you go to deploy, did you ever consider calling now twice, where one of the deployments is just the Mongo database, so that you do have a persistent database you can use on your next deployment?
Yes, I can repeat the question because I was actually going to even include this in my talk. One of the options we did consider was to deploy multiple Now applications, one with just MongoDB, and connect to that from the other one. But I saw that there are, you're advised not to deploy Now as a database. I wasn't able to get it working just initially with some tests, and then I also, when I ran into issues, Googled around and saw that you're, it's not intended to be used as a database. So that's why we avoided that option. Any other questions? Well, thank you.